Good afternoon, everybody. This is Jeanette. Welcome to our Sage 300 CRE web class on year-end procedures for 2018. Before we start, I'd like to point out that there are 3 handouts in the GoToWebinar panel. There is a copy of the PowerPoint that we're going to be reviewing. There is a Word document that we're going to cover when we get into job cost about creating a completed jobs folder. And then there's also a link to the 2017 year-end guide. The reason we sent out the 2017 guide is that the 2018 guide is Sage has not released it yet. Looking through it, though, it'll be exactly the same as the 2017. They're just, I would imagine, only going to go through and change the year in it. And I think that's the only difference that will be the only difference between the two. We sent this to you so that you have a booklet to follow along with. You can take notes in it. I'll refer to it a couple times during the session to tell you what page you can find some of this information on. Right? But again, you've got 3 handouts or documents that you can print out and have handy for yourself when you are going through the year-end process. Okay. All right, so our agenda for today, we've actually broken up our year-end processing into 2 parts, into closing the year, and then we'll have another session in December for the Atrix forms. So we're not going to be covering the Atrix forms today, just the actual processing within Sage 300 CRE for each of the applications. So if you want to make a note, December 11th, we will be holding our Atrix webinar, and then a week later on the 18th, we'll repeat this session again. So if you have any employees that you would like to have them sit in on a repeat of this session, please let us know. You're more than welcome to come back. All right, so we're going to cover today preparing for year-end in each application, what you need to check for, what kind of backups you need to do. We're going to go through the applications in a little bit different order than what is in the year-end guide. I've actually moved payroll to the end so that those of you that are not using Sage 300 payroll, once we get to that module, you'll be able to leave the training if you'd like. All right, we're going to go through AP first. We're going to take a look at preparing, reporting, what you need to check for. We'll go through some of the other applications, starting with accounts receivable, through and just briefly touching on residential management and service management. On some of these, I'm actually going to get into the software for you and show you where the closes are. In job cost, I'm going to demonstrate creating an archive folder that you can copy your closed jobs and transactions into. That's going to be followed by taking a look at general ledger. I'll actually go through the close year process. We'll talk about what happens in general ledger when you close the year, and then what will happen if you have prior year adjustments that you need to make. Lastly, we'll go in and we'll take a look at the payroll module, getting ready for W-2s. So a couple of things before we jump into the first module. Let's talk about the backup and copy. All of you, I'm sure, have your IT department doing a full system backup probably every night. You want to make sure that, especially right before you do any closings in these modules, that you either have that full backup right at that point, or you make a Sage backup, and I'll demonstrate that for you in one of the modules. And then one of the things I talk to people about too is preserving an off-site copy. A lot of people will put they have their media in the system, they're copying over it, they might be replacing whatever the media is, some type of a drive that you're backing up to, but you're not taking it off site. So those can get damaged, lost, whatever. And so having an off-site copy is not a bad idea. The other thing that I should have put on the slide but didn't, importance of testing that backup media. I've spoken with several clients in the past who were sure that they had a backup, they had a need to go to that backup, and found out that for weeks or months, the backup had been failing and they didn't know it. So they didn't have a backup that they could go to, which again would eliminate the need for rekeying data, because if you lose the backup, you have to go back to wherever the last good backup was and rebuild from there. Now, each application is going to have their own set of files, and actually in the back of your year-end guide, in one of the appendixes, it lists each module and the files that pertain to it. I'm going to, again, demonstrate using the tool inside Sage to do the backup. I'm hoping that most or all of you are familiar with file tools to do that backup. Because of the way the Sage 300 data is structured, using Windows Explorer to copy your files or back the files up is not going to, in some cases, is not going to get all the pieces that you need. Okay. So backup, especially at year-end, extremely important. Make sure you're getting a full backup. Think about storing some of those backups off-site. Okay. All right, the year-end releases from Sage. They don't send CDs anymore with their software, so this will be a download. You'll get a notification mid-December to end of December. I checked with them again today to see if there was an estimated release date, and so far all I'm hearing again is mid to end of December. They're only supporting 2 versions of Sage this year, 17.1, and I'm not sure what the update number on it is going to be yet, and then 18.2. So those of you that are on a lower version of Sage may want to go ahead and go to the 18.2 year-end version when it comes out. Those of you that are on 18.1, you'll have to go to 18.2 when it's released. There will not be an 18.1 version for year-end. And then taxes are on a separate, they will be a separate download. So those taxes are not included in the year-end release, the full version release of the software. So when you get that notification from Sage, it'll be a download, and you'll run it through Payroll. So when we get into Payroll, I'll show you that. What I would recommend is that you do the download as soon as you get the notification from Sage that the tax update is ready. Don't update it, just download it. As you go in and out of Payroll, it will prompt you that there is an update that needs to be applied, and it'll keep doing that until you actually do the update. This will be your reminder before you do your first payroll for 2019. Because it would be, I've seen in the past, it's kind of easy to forget. You get the year-end release on, you're going good, you got your year closed, you've got W-2s maybe done, you're ready to do that first payroll, and you go ahead and do it, not remembering, excuse me, that there is a tax update for the new year. So that's kind of a nice thing to do, is to download it, let it keep warning you until you're ready to actually run that 2019 payroll. A quick note on closure dates for both Sage and OnPoint this year: Christmas Eve, Christmas, New Year's Day. I double checked with Sage, both Sage and OnPoint this morning. So the Christmas Eve and that day is closed for both. Okay. A little blurb about paper. We'll talk about this again in our Atrix Forms class. You can go ahead and start buying your 4-part perforated paper. So you're going to be printing your W-2s and your 1099s through Atrix. It's a complete laser printing routine. Other than maybe if you are printing the red copy for the federal, you might need to buy some of that. For the, let's look at the next slide for the 1099s. Let me go back to this previous one. So whether you are e-filing or not, your printing is going to happen through the Atrix. So at some point, once you think everything is complete for 2018, you can do test runs for both the 1099s and the W-2s to plain paper, prints the form and everything. And again, you'll need to double check as you launch Atrix, and we'll go through the upgrade process when we do the Atrix class. Those forms will, start showing up as Atrix gets them completed. So probably again for them, same as with Sage, mid to end of the year before you may start seeing the 2018 forms that you're going to need. But you can still run the 2017 1099s, W-2s, just to test the totals that are showing up on each. And again, blank perforated 4-part paper for both W-2s and 1099s for if you're going to be mailing those out yourself. If you're having Atrix do not only the e-filing but also emailing the forms to your vendors and your employees, you don't have to buy the paper. Just print your test runs out on blank paper and let Atrix take care of the rest. Now, there are reports inside Sage under Reports, Tax Preparation, W-2 Count. If you are going to do some of the printing yourself, you might want to run that report and then the 1099 preparation report, just so that you can see how much blank 4-part stock you need to order. All right, so I think we're ready to go ahead and start jumping into the applications. We're going to start with accounts payable. This is on page 16 in the year-end guide. I'm leaving the December task here to order your forms and your paper, just because that's something, just a reminder to get that out of the way. Even though you may not be printing, it's doing complete laser, you're actually ordering blank paper, but it's good to already have that. In January, you want to make sure your year-end dates are correct. We're going to jump in the software here in a minute and take a look at the settings. We're also going to take a look at the vendor setup, just so that you can see where you may need to check that the vendor information is correct. So here we're just saying, make sure that your year-end dates before you cross, I would actually maybe even do this in December. Make sure that your fiscal year-end and your 1099 year-end are current. Then you're going to make sure everything is posted for 2018, invoices and any manual checks or EFT payments that you need to make sure are in. You're going to test your vendor totals by printing the preparation report. Again, and it's going to show you who has been marked to receive a 1099. And then I would go ahead and test print 2 blank paper. And then lastly, when you're ready, you'll do the actual forms, print forms if you're going to print them yourself, and then you'll have Atrix do the e-file for you. Now, there is some file maintenance that you may want to do at the end of the year. I'm going to show you these when we jump into the software. Accounts payable is notorious for having the files become larger and larger and larger. And it's because not only are vendors stored in your AP master file, but the invoices and the checks that you've written to those vendors for those invoices are stored there as well. So it's very good to get in a habit of at least once a year to move some of the old stuff out to history, and then to do a compact on your files so that the file sizes go down, because think of this kind of as a rule: the smaller the file, the faster the reporting. So if your aging reports are taking forever to run, it's because the system is having to sort through all of those old invoices and checks, and it may be time to move those out, so that it doesn't have to sort through as many transactions. We're going to take a look at the close year programs, a very simple process for each of these. The backup, I've included the file names for AP for you on this slide. You've got the current file, the history files, the master files. If you're doing sales tax, you've got a master TXM. You should make sure you have a backup of it. And even the new .api, if you're doing pending invoices, those will still be stored in this file. All right, so let's jump in. There's a few things I want to show you inside AP. So we're going to go ahead and go into the AP application. First thing I want to point out here is under AP settings. This is where your dates are stored. So you want to make sure that your year ending date and it matches your current fiscal year ending date. So this should match to general ledger. And your 1099 year ending date should be your calendar year. Now, AP stores totals for this year, next year, and last year in the vendor master file. There's no month end, so we don't have month end buckets that we have to deal with, but we do have year ending dates that we need to deal with. You can go past this date here into 2019, and it will store 2019 in the next year field. So you can hold this open until you're ready to run your 1099s and run them on the current year, or what the Sage thinks the current year is, inside the vendor master file. I want you guys to check these dates before you get to the end of 2018. If this still says 2017, if you guys forgot or someone forgot to run close year last year, do it now and roll this, because the information it's there. It's just in the next year bucket. So if we take a look at our vendors, you see down here at the bottom, we have this year, last year, next year. When you close the year, this year gets moved into last year, and next year gets rolled into this year. As long as you don't go beyond 1 year into the future, you should be okay, right? So make sure that you double check that year-end, those year-end dates in AP settings before the end of the year. All right, now on the vendor record, so in Setup Vendors, you have a 1099 Settings tab that you need to be aware of. If you've set up vendors that need a 1099 and you forget to check this box, so they're not showing up on your preparation report, you can come in here later and check the box and you'll be fine. The system will automatically populate the totals at the bottom of the screen regardless of whether this checkbox is marked. This check mark only affects whether or not they get a form. It doesn't affect whether or not the amounts get updated down here at the bottom. So every time you do a check run, all vendors are updating this 1099 amount paid field. If you need to mark the second TIN notice on the form, check this box. If you need to move the gross proceeds paid to an attorney on the miscellaneous form, I think it goes from box 7 to box 12 or 13. Hold on a second. Let's double check that. Well, they don't actually say what box it is, but there is a box that is labeled gross proceeds paid to an attorney. You'll check that box here, and it will move the amount down. Otherwise, it prints it in box 7, I think. The taxpayer's recipient's tax ID goes here. This will either be a federal ID or a Social Security number. The recipient's tax ID, if you need to print the form and have it say John Smith, DBA Alpha Insulation, you'll put John Smith in here, and when the form prints, it'll print his name first, and then the second line will be DBA, and it prints the name of the vendor. The form type will default to a miscellaneous non-employee compensation form. If they need a different type of form, just come in and change the bullet. Each vendor ID can only print one form type. If you have a vendor that needs more than one form, you have two options. You either have to set them up with a separate vendor ID for the other form, or you come in here, mark the first form, come down to the 1099 amount paid, and I've got audit setup activity turned on so I can get into this field, change this amount to whatever belongs on the first form. Print the form, then come back in, change this bullet to whatever the other form type is, change the amount, and then run that type of form. Right? So two choices. 2 vendors, 3 vendors, however many you need for the different forms, or run the first form with the correct amount, come back, change the form type, change the amount. Excuse me. Okay. All right. All right. After you have run your forms, and again, you can run the forms if you decide that you want to close the year right away when you start January processing. You can close the year. The task is here under close year and close 1099 year. And here it just shows you what the new dates are going to be. If you go ahead and run this, when you run your form, your 1099 forms, you have the choice to pick the current year, which would be 2019, or the prior year, which would go out and pull the amounts from last year for 2018. All right, the move command. This is where you're going to move your fully paid invoices and checks. You're going to use this command to move current to history. It's going to, if you haven't done this before, it's going to create the history file, the AP history file. It actually creates 2 of them. Let me explain why here in just a second. All right, so it's asking for a cutoff date here. So you might want to pick a date somewhere in the past. Maybe you want to keep everything maybe for the last year and a half out there. So you're going to cut off at June 30th of 2016 and leave everything else. Anything older than that is going to get moved. Anything newer than that stays in the master file and the current file. So what happens if I were to click start on this, it would move all the things dated in the current file to a history.apt. So current.apt to history.apt. Then it moves the information in your master file to the history.api file. So that's why you get 2 history files when you move in accounts payable. And then once that's done, you're going to come in here under Tools, and you're going to go to File Doctor, and you're going to select the AP Master and the AP Current file. These 2. Leave it at check. Let's see. That's grayed out. It's going to check for any issues, but you're going to check the box to compact good files. That's going to shrink those files down, because when you do the move, it leaves the space that those records occupied inside those files on your system. So when you're done with the move, your file size is still the same size, but it's got holes in it from where those records were. Doing the compact crunches those things or moves them together, freeing up that empty space, making the file size smaller, which in turn makes your reports run faster. Okay. All right, so that is accounts payable, getting ready. Property management, what you're going to be printing out of it, if you have that module, are your 1099 forms. And again, you're going to do that through Atrix. There isn't a close year in property management. You'll make sure that everything is posted. You'll get a good backup of your data, and then you'll close the month, and that will roll it into 2019. All right, some of the other applications, this starts on page 25 in the year-end guide. Accounts receivable is pretty simple. Just, again, make sure everything for the year has been posted. Any month-end reports that you need for reconciliation, like an aging report, make sure that that's done. Get a backup, and then run tasks close year. So it's like, it has the same concept that AP has. There's no close month that you run during the year for accounts receivable, but you do need to close the year to move those buckets this year, last year, next year. And then again, it also has a move command to get invoices out to history. And again, this is one, accounts receivable is another one that if you let it go year after year, all of your reports are going to start running slower and slower. So pick a cutoff point, move some of that old data to history, and then compact those files to make them smaller. Cash management, it is the same thing. Make sure you've got everything in for 2018 with Edit Register in those banks. Get everything posted. There is a year-end date in CM settings. And actually, let me jump over there. I'm going to show you to an AR. Let me show you AR first. This is another thing you need to verify. You have a year-end date here on this first window in AR settings. So make sure that that hasn't gone beyond 1 year into the future or backwards in the past. So this should be either at 17 or at 18. And then cash management, it also has in CM settings, it has a year ending date. Make sure that it's in the current year. Now cash management, there's only one thing that the year-end closing does for cash management. If you're recording interest income in Edit Register, when you post that, it actually updates on the interest tab, it updates this tab right here. Interest year to date, next year, last year. And the year-end close rolls these three fields around. That's all it does. That's all the close year does for cash management. It also has a move. So when you go into Edit Register, if you've got years worth of checks and deposits and adjustments in there, think about moving those entries out to history. And then compact your register file. So that the transaction file in cash management is a little bit different in that it doesn't have a new file or a current file. What it actually has, back up here, is this register transaction file. This is a combination of new and current. So you want to highlight this file and check the box to compact good files. Right. Contracts. Oops, let me go back. I don't think I put contracts in here. Hold on. Let me find my There it is. Okay. So contracts, you're going to do this at the same time that you do JobCast. You should be closing it at the same time as JC. Neither one of these programs has a year-end close. So for these two, you just continue to close the month forever. The system knows when it's at the end of a year, and so it'll roll or zero out year-to-date totals once you cross into a new year. So here, just make sure that everything has been posted. You have a backup, then go ahead and close the month. If you've been changing the status on any of your contracts, there's an option under Tools to move those contracts out to history. So if you're having to scroll through a whole bunch of old completed contracts when you go in to file open contract, you might think about moving those out so that your list is a little bit smaller. Equipment, if any of you have the equipment cost module, again, make sure everything is posted, get your year-end reports out, and then close the month. Job cost, same thing. Because there's no year-end, you're going to be doing just a normal timed close month. Make sure everything has been posted, print any year-end reports that you have, back up, close the month. I hope all of you are looking at the close month journal that gets printed out and verifying that every job is in balance. Let us know if you ever run across a job that's telling you that it's out of balance, and we'll show you how to fix that. Okay, the move options for job cost are a little bit different. You actually have two choices here. You can either move current to history, and that leaves the transactions inside your current data folder. But then when you go to move your jobs, if you do it this way, your jobs have to go out to a second folder. You can't have two master.jcm files in the same data folder. And so one of the handouts that I sent you is an option to create what I'm calling a completed job folder. So that in job cost, you can move your jobs and the transactions that go with those jobs to the same folder and be able to run reports on those closed out jobs all from the same place. So I want to demonstrate that to you. And we'll kind of follow along with the instructions that I sent here. Let me jump over to job cost. All right, so I'm going to create a brand new folder, and I'm going to call this Sage Completed Jobs. And I'm going to use the current setup, so it's going to have all the same structures for me. I'm going to OK that. All right, and then I'm going to switch back over to Timberline Construction sample data for a second. I'm going to mark some of my jobs as being closed. It just makes it easier if you have a list of your completed jobs. If you can go into Setup Jobs and change the status on those jobs. To closed. Go ahead and save that. And actually, I'll do two of them here. Closed. Save that. And then close out of here. Okay. And now I'm going to switch back over to my Sage Completed Job folder. The other thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to tell the system with file locations that in this Sage completed job folder, I need it to look back to my main data folder for some information. There are some reports and inquiries that you're going to want to run that need information from accounts payable, accounts receivable, contracts, equipment, maybe payroll, general ledger. And we're not moving those records or those files into this folder. The only thing that's going to be in this new Sage completed jobs folder are my closed jobs. So I need to tell it if it needs to find anything to do with the AP master file to go look. Let's see. And you have to give it the full path name here. Okay, so it's going to look for my AP file there. Yep, I know. And then I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to put it also on here. And I'm going to come down to the AR master file and put it here. In the AR standard file and put it there. Let's see. I need the CM. I've got a list of the files that you need to put this path in your handout on the second page. Let's see. I might also need that one. Okay. The CN contract. Yes, I know. Because I have purchasing installed. Yes. Okay. Yes. I'm not going to do anything to the JC files. I'm going to come down and grab the payroll. Oh, come on. Get down here. And the tax master. Okay. So now with these path names locked in, all of my inquiries and reports that I run from inside Sage completed jobs will work. Otherwise, it's going to keep stopping and saying, I can't find AR master file. I can't find, there's no payroll system file. There's no contract file. So this will take care of all of those types of warning messages or error messages that you might get when you try to run a report or an inquiry. All right, so I'm going to come back here and go back into my construction sample data. I'm going to go to the tools, move, and I'm going to move the transactions first. And I'm going to go current to current. Now, because I don't have named files turned on, it's going to ask me for a destination. So you look up here at the top window. The destination is where you want to send those closed transactions. I'm going to use the drop down here and go back up to the data main folder, and I'm going to grab my Sage completed jobs folder. And I'm going to say open that. See here it's filled in with current. It's going to prompt me that the file's not there. Is it okay to create it? I'm going to say yes. And then I'm going to do a condition here. And I'm going to index back over to the JC job file. And I'm going to say grab the status field. Get down to it. Oops, should have been in up there close enough to the top here. Should be on the next tab. There it is. Went past it. Closed. Okay, so I'm going to move the transactions first so that I have access to this status field of closed. It's going to look at the jobs to see. Okay, and I'll go ahead and start that. Okay, so it's moved. All right, so now I'm going to come back and run a second move, this time on jobs. Again, it's asking me for the destination, and the destination is going to be back here in my Sage completed jobs. And it's going to prompt me again here that the file's not there. Do you want to create it? I can say yes. And then again, I'm going to do a condition that the status down to it is equal to closed. Okay. And then start. Okay, it's done. All right, so now if I go in and look at the jobs, I'm in, wrong folder. Let me go back out and switch over to my completed jobs folder. Just do an inquiry, might be easier. Well, whoops. Okay, I missed a file. That's okay. Okay, so now if I do a list, I should just have the two jobs that I closed. Okay. And if I do an inquiry, I just have the two jobs, and I should be able to drill down. So everything is there about those two jobs. And the transactions, like I said before, the transactions and the job record are together. If you do current to history, it's going to move those transactions to the history file in your current data folder. And then when you move the jobs have to end up in a totally different folder. They're not together. So you can't report on them together unless you move the closed job back. Now you can close these back or move these back. So if you decide, whoops, I need to get one of these jobs back into my main data folder because I'm going to, some more transactions have come through. Just move the job itself back from the completed jobs folder. The destination would be back to your main data folder. Much easier to find the information. I know a lot of clients who have created a folder for each year. So they'll have closed jobs for 2017, 16, 15, 14. They don't know when those jobs were closed, so they're having to look in every single one of those folders to find the job record. With this concept, they're all there together. You're keeping every single completed job together in one folder along with all the transactions that go with it. Much easier to take that request from a project manager that's asking for a report on a job that was closed 2 years ago. Okay. Now, the last thing you want to do here, too, is, again, under Tools, you're going to use File Doctor. Not File Yep, File Doctor. Yes, we do. And what you're going to compact is your master file and your current file. And again, check the box to compact good files. Because again, this is another application. If you let it run for years without moving information out, the reports are going to get slower and slower. As soon as you do the move and you do the compact, you're going to be shocked at how much faster those job cost reports run. Okay. The residential management and service management, just noting here, it's kind of the same as the equipment and that. Just make sure everything is posted, print your reports back up, and then do an end of month. Service management, if you have those, just make sure everything is posted. If you have month-end reports that you run, there is no closing for service management. You can move work orders to history. There is, if you look at page 27 in the year-end guide, it talks about using the archive procedures for that. All right. So those are, kind of some of the simpler ones, other than creating that job cost folder. Those are pretty clean. All right, so let's talk general ledger. I think that you should treat your close year in general ledger the same as you treat your close month. Just the only difference here is you want to make sure that you've got everything that you know of for 2018 entered and posted. You should already be looking at your new .glt file for rejected entries. So every time you run post in any application that interfaces to GL, it's going to show you in that journal what couldn't post in general ledger. So you should be looking at that new file, getting things posted that failed previously. And then a tip that I would give you too is if you have a lot of stuff in there that has been corrected already, you can see the original entry and the correcting entry, so the net effect is 0. If that's all that's left in that new .glt file, use the file tools and rename that file. Don't delete it, just rename it. Put a date in there, like new space 11/28/18. So at least it's still there, and you know when it was created. So that if you have to go back and research, maybe something's missing and maybe it was left in one of those backup files, we can rename it again, and we can get the information out. Make sure that your suspense account has a 0 balance. Make sure that all of your month-end reports are in balance. Make sure that you are reconciling with AP, AR, job cost. Make sure all of that, cash management, all of that reconciles, which you should be doing at the end of each month right now. Then print your financial statements, draft ones for now, and then make sure you have a good backup. So for year-end processing, in addition to what we just talked about, you probably will want to at least maybe create a print file that has a year-to-date ledger in it. If you have the changes or adjustments from your accountant at this point, go ahead and make those. And then instead of running close current period, you're going to run close fiscal year. And what this does is it's actually going to write to retained earnings an entry for your income and expense accounts, and then it actually creates transactions out in your history file. And then beyond that, you may or may not want to move entries from current to history within GL itself, and then compact your files. Some people will just keep that current file going, depending on how big your company is and how much detail you're sending from the other modules. That might create a huge current file. You might want to think about letting current just be the current year and history be all of your prior year transactions. Okay. So here's what happens when you close the year. It's creating an entry to retained earnings for every income, cost, and expense account that you have, and it's zeroing them out. So on those accounts, it's clearing the current balance, and then it's rolling everything. So The master file on the balances tab, the year-end balances get updated. It advances all of those balances by 1 year. It rolls all of the period end dates. It advances all of the account activity fields. And then it advances the future. So it's doing all the things that it normally does for a closed month, plus it's dealing with the year-end balances on the balances tab. So this is why even at closed month, having a backup of your GL master file is imperative. This is something that we can't fix. If the power goes out in the middle of it, or somebody accidentally shuts off the server, or something hiccups and and the whole system resets itself and starts back up right in the middle of a closed year or a closed month for general ledger, you have to go to backup. Because if it'll be in the middle of an account and it'll be trying to move all these buckets around, and boom, we have no idea where it stopped. We don't know where to tell it to pick up. Even running it a second time is not going to fix what it did, the previous run. So if something like that happens, you have to restore your GL master file from backup. And if it is, the current and history too, because if it happens during a year-end close, it's creating all of those entries. And so you need to, just to be on the safe side, you need the current file and the history file as well. Right, I'm going to come back to prior year adjustments in a minute. Let me switch over here to general ledger. And let's just talk about, again, where all of this activity is happening. So this tab right here, this is where all of this gets updated. So the balance 1 year ago, year-end 1 year, it bumps all of these down, kind of like a wave. Over here, as 5 goes over to 6, down, 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 10 drops off. It zeroes out the year-to-date net change on your income, cost and expense accounts. This number here, actually on all of them, it zeroes this out. It actually moves year-to-date net change gets moved down here to net change 1 year ago. So on all of your income, cost, expense accounts, current balance should always equal year-to-date net change. On a balance sheet account, asset or liability, current balance is a to-date balance. It is going on forever. It doesn't get zeroed out during a closing process. But the year-to-date net change, this is all a total of the activity for the current year. It uses all of that and then all of the information on this tab when you are running current ledgers and year-to-date ledgers and that. And so if something gets jumbled up here, this is how you can get out of balance. Or it can cause, I don't know if any of you have ever seen those little, what we call rabbit ears on the current ledger or the year-to-date ledger. If you ever have that happen, where on the total line, it's printing 2 exclamation marks after the ending balance, it means that the activity for that account does not, the transactions don't equal the activity that's summarized on this window here. So it could be a combination of incorrect amounts here based on balances on this tab, based on the actual transactions that are sitting in the new file, or excuse me, the current file or the history file. So general ledger, very complex. That's why the backup here is so extremely important. Right, so when you close your year, if you're using prefixes, you will see a list of the prefixes and what their current period ending date is and what the fiscal year end date is. When you OK on either of these, it's going to show you your retained earnings account and the amount. This amount needs to match your net income/loss on either your balance sheet or on your income statement. If this number does not match your financial statement, then we need to research. 99% of the time, the reason is when you set up a brand new account, this account type, notice where the bullet is. The default is current asset. So if I add this in and I forget to change this to an expense account, then it's got the wrong account type on it. And when the system goes to do the close fiscal year, it adds up these three account types here. It takes the income and subtracts the cost and expense to come up with the amount. It would not include this new account. So to fix this, what you need to do is come in here and scroll through and look to see that everything has the right account type. And so what I always do is I start at the beginning with the first one, and then I just use the next button at the bottom, and I just start scrolling through, and I keep going, making sure that all the assets are marked correctly, all the liability accounts are marked correctly, and then I start paying attention once I get down to the income accounts that nothing jumps over to the other side. So you want to make sure everything that bullet stays over here on this side. If it jumps back over, then I need to take a look at that account and find out why it's marked as either 9 times out of 10 it's a current asset, or somebody accidentally marked it as a current liability when it's not in the right range. Now you can change the account. You need to change it here, change the base account if you're using prefixes, then come in under Setup Accounts and put in the full account and change it here because it copied that over when you generated the chart of accounts. So come in here and also change it here. Then go back and run close fiscal year again. And this number should be right. If it's still not right, then we need to take a look at whether your general ledger is in balance. That's the next thing I always look for, is I would run a trial balance and make sure that you don't have an out of balance situation where something failed to post. Okay. So a lot of troubleshooting. If you go to run the close year and it's not matching up to what it should be, then we need to start researching. And you can give us a call if you can't find it, and we'll either connect with you or have you send us files, and we'll research it for you. All right, now prior year adjustments. So the reason I said earlier that you should treat your closed fiscal year when you get into January the same as you would as a closed month is because your accountant may take a couple of months before he can get his adjusting entries to you for 2018. When you hold a period open, you can post, that in General Ledger, you can post 6 months into the future. What you can't do is run future ledgers other than using the year-to-date option. You can do a date range and get something there, but you cannot run future financial statements or trial balances. So go ahead and close the year in a normal time frame. And then once you get those entries from your accountant, go ahead and follow this procedure. You just, again, make sure your data is backed up. Go into Tasks, Open Close Posting Period, and reopen the last period of 2018. Use task record entries and record the entries as of 2018. Post. I've threw another backup in here just for good measure. And then this is important here. You need to close the fiscal year again. It won't close 2019. It's going to know that there were entries made to 2018, and it's going to tell you that you're not at the end of the year, but there were some adjustments made. And when you go forward from there, you'll see that the total of those adjustments, and that'll post to retained earnings. Then you can reprint your financial statements and even reprint a year-to-date ledger. And then go back under open close posting period and check that period off as being closed. Now, if you forget to do this step right here to close your fiscal year again, when you as soon as you run a financial statement for the current period, it'll be out of balance, and it will be out of balance by that amount that you posted from the accountant. Okay. So at that point, that's kind of like a reminder. You need to close the fiscal year again to get those entries posted to retained earnings. All right, moving transactions current to history. We kind of talked about that. Compact your files again. These would be the files that you need to back up. And I think this would be a good time to demonstrate. Let me go back into General Ledger and do it there. So Tools, File Tools. Okay, let's leave it at Backup. I always use the Add Files option, and I'm going to grab the master. These are all really close. If you've got multiple files, I always do them one at a time so that you're sure to get the ones that you actually want. Let me find the current. Let's put these in order here. And another easier way is just start typing the name, and it here under file name, and it'll give you a list. So we'll get that current file. Okay, so I've got the master, the history, the current. The reason I do add files is because it doesn't, in the backup file, it will not have this big long path name in it. It'll just have these 3 file names. Then I can restore those 3 files anywhere I want. Otherwise, it just gets really complicated if you pick this add folder. It's harder to restore the files because you have to make sure that you are at the root. I'd have to be back at C to actually restore them to the right spot. So just a side note, add files sometimes is easier. And I'm just going to create this out of my desktop for now, and I'm going to call this, we'll call it 2018 GL Backup. Okay, green lights means it's good to go. If you've got any red lights here, you need to make sure that you fix the problem. Most of the time, the red light's going to be right here, ensuring files are not in use. As those of you that have been on the system for a while know, closing stuff requires that no one is accessing those files, even just for verification. We lock the files down when we do any of the year-end closes or the closed months as well. So you need to schedule this, the backup and the closing, when no one else is on the system. And then just next all the way through. And there it is. And the reason again, we're recommending, there's instructions on how to use the file tool backup in the year-end procedures guide, and then there's also an appendix in there for all the different file types. Because Sage 300 uses Pervasive as its database, the information is not stored all in one file or one big file like it is with SQL. It's stored in multiple places. So there's a piece in the main data folder. There are more pieces in the subfolder underneath that folder called PV Data, PV for pervasive. So using the File Tools option inside Sage guarantees that you are getting all of the parts that you need if you have to restore that file from a backup to be able to use it again. Okay, we're to our payroll section. So anyone who's joined us that does not have payroll, you're welcome to go ahead and leave us. Or if you'd like to stay, you're welcome to stay with us as well. All right, so for payroll, you need to make sure that if you're going to be printing your own forms to mail out or hand out to employees, make sure that you get the perforated paper. Get your final payroll for 2018 in and posted. You might want to double check your W-2 format. Atrix does use the W-2 format that you define under Tools. We'll take a look at that briefly here. For January, you want to make sure, again, the final payroll for 2018 is in. You've got all of your reports that you need in. Reconciling payroll to itself and to GL, we're just talking about making sure all of the reports are run. Fourth quarter is done. All your subject to and taxable reports and tax reports are run. And then you go ahead and back up your files. Now, the other thing you want to decide at this point is when do you want to print your W-2 forms? You can print them before you close the year or after, because Atrix has the option to run off of the last year fields. And I think most people at this point, because you probably are going to need to run a payroll that first week in January. So you may not be ready to run W-2s. So just make sure that you have a good backup and go ahead and close the year. Then when it's time to run your W-2s, you'll select the reporting year. 2018 will be an option on the screen when you go in to run W-2s. We do need to make sure, though, that any formulas that you're using for things like the 401k, that you are using last year fields in those formulas so that it pulls the right amounts into box 12. Okay. So you need to go ahead and make sure, before you run your W-2s that you've got the year-end release on. I would go ahead and run a test run to blank paper before doing your final run. And again, it's up to you whether you want Atrix to print the final forms and either email or mail to the employees, and then whether you're e-filing the federal and state copies through Atrix. Now, before you close the year, you want to make sure that any pays, deductions, or fringes that need to be carried over into the new year are marked to retain year-to-date totals on those IDs. Right? Then you'll close your year. Now, prior to that, you will have downloaded your taxes, but you won't have updated it. So you'll go ahead and update your taxes, and then you're going to verify the taxes have been updated before you run that first payroll. Okay. So let's go in and just take a look at a few things inside payroll here so you can see what we're talking about. All right. So this is the field we're talking about as far as retaining year-to-date totals at close year. This checkbox right here. Usually on pays, what is carried over are the accruals. So it could be like on the sick. So in this sample data, we don't have that set up right because those would be zeroed out, unless sick is something that they cannot carry over. Maybe for vacation, you are retaining it because you're allowing them to carry over totals at year end for unused vacation hours or PTO hours. So it just depends on what it is and what the parameters are or the rules for those types of accruals. So again, pay IDs that carry over usually are accrual type pay IDs. Deductions, this could be maybe a loan. They borrowed money and you're taking out so much a check for them to pay it back, and they won't have paid it back in the current year. So on that, you may have checked this again. Check the box to retain totals at close year. You want that amount to continue to accumulate on the employee record because you may have set a limit on that deduction and you want it to stop once that advance is paid back or that loan is paid back. Now we have that same field on the fringes, but to be honest, I have not ever had to mark that for anybody, so I don't have an example for a fringe. But it's there if you have some type of a benefit that needs to be carried over at year end. The verifying your tax update, I would come in here under Setup, Taxes, Tax Rates, go to the Federal Withholding ID, spell it right, and what you're looking for is this effective date. Right now, everyone should say 1/1/2018. After you have updated your taxes, this should say 19. And that's how you know that the tax is updated correctly. Now, the update for your taxes is right here under Tools. This is only inside payroll. Once you get the notice, you'll come in here with Download Taxes. Now, there is a check mark. If you're going to wait and do the download right before you run your first payroll for 2019, you can go ahead and check this box right here that says Update Tax Files when download is complete. So it does the download and the update all at the same time. Or leave this unchecked and just download the files. And then when you're ready to run that first payroll, come in here and run Update Taxes. And then you should be good to go. After you run the Update Taxes, then come back here to Setup, Taxes, Tax Rates, and double check the federal withholding, the effective date. The W-2 form is here under Modify Forms, W-2 forms. Now, you can have multiple forms out here, but I don't really see a reason for it. Atrix will prompt you. If it sees more than one form design out there, it will ask you which one do you want to use. Some people will create a brand new one for each year. So you might see 2015, 2016, 2017, and then you think, well, I'm going to create a 2018 form as well. You actually don't need to do that. It can all run off the same one. So here, I should have a penny in here, minimum. I don't want to print W-2s for employees that don't have any money. And then here under amounts, this is where I will come in and modify box 12 and probably box 14 as well. So box 12 is where all of your federal items go. We're going to actually recover this when we do our Atrix class next month. So for now, I just want to point out to you that this is where the form is located that Atrix actually uses. So it will come here to get either the ID or the formula. This is what I was talking about before, whether you close your year prior to running W-2s. If you do, and you're going to run your W-2s out of the current data folder, we need to make sure that this is a formula and that the formula is pulling the prior year amounts for you for these different items. Now, in your guide, there's quite a few pages for the Atrix stuff, and we will be going through that in our Atrix class next month. Okay. You should also move old checks to history. Okay, so continuing on with payroll for the file maintenance. If you're looking at a current file and when you pull it up to look at employee checks and you see checks dated all the way back in 2010, you need to move that to history. Now, what needs to be left in your current file, you need all the 2018 checks in the current file until you run your W-2s. Atrix looks to the current file for its information. Right. Once the W-2s are done, you can move those out of the way. You can also move your terminated employees and then compact files. The other thing I wanted to point out too, as far as payroll is concerned, if you do a like a subject to report, we've got multiple types of subject to reports here. As long as you're still in 2018, you can do these top two for the employee and the employer. If you've already closed the year, you're going to want these prior period subject to employee, employer. You can also do it with a date range. Okay. If you find that you've got some invalid subject to or taxable fields and you realize it's because maybe one of the setups was done incorrectly, something was checkmarked incorrectly, either on a pay or a deduction. Okay. You can fix the ID and then you can come in under Tools and run Recalculate Subject To. And what that will do is it will actually go out and reset the status of that ID on the checks, and then it will rebuild the taxable and subject to amounts on the employee record. Now, if it's just one or two people that need to be recalculated, use your ranges button and pick those individuals. You don't have to do it on everybody. It will go out. You want to be sure you check this box here to clear the taxable and subject to period totals so that it rebuilds those amounts in the employee master file. So we can fix taxable and subject to amounts that are incorrect based on those IDs that have been set up. Okay. What we can't fix with this program is the actual tax. So if you have a tax that needs to be corrected, you're going to have to do that with a check. It either has to be on maybe the last check of the year if the employee needs to be adjusted, or if it's an employer tax, you can do a dummy manual check because payroll allows you to create 0 checks. You can make an adjustment to any of those employer taxes with a dummy manual check and then post that through, and that should correct the tax amount. All right. All right, so I think that brings us to the end of our processing, year-end processing for the applications. Just some tips here. You should be getting an email from Sage about the year-end release and about the tax update. Again, supported versions 17.1 and 18.2. The year-end guide, let me show you where you can find that. If you come into the application and you go to Help and you go down to Product Documents, it will log you in and you'll see all the different areas here. Just click on this drop down for Sage 300 and then you see where it says Year End. Here's where the Year-End Procedures Guides are. And as soon as they update, right now the only one that's out there is the 2017. And that's why we sent that to you, just so you could have it for the class if you weren't in the class last year or you didn't download the guide last year. Okay, so let me close that. This is also where you will see the, they'll have the update listed for, depending on which version you want. It'll be under version 18 if you're on 18, or it'll be under 17. Yeah. Actually, these are all the documents. They're changing the way they're notifying people and where you find the actual release. They're trying to get the Sage City website involved. So this is all new this year. You may be downloading the year-end release from there. I did double check with Sage. Again, the releases are not due till mid to end of December. If you are on version 18.1 at this point, the changes are going to go into version 18.2. So you will have to upgrade to that version. It'll actually take you to that version. So you'll get the year-end release plus all the changes that they've made to 18.2 at that time. I haven't seen the Sage Year-End Weekly Tips and Common Questions. Some of the common questions are in the year-end guide. I don't know if they're going to involve the Sage University or Sage City with the weekly tips, but be on the lookout for that. There's also a live chat option. Sage has already started their year-end massive phone calls. So if you try to call Sage right now, you'll be on hold for quite a while, or they'll have you do a callback option. The other choice that you have is to do a live chat. So inside here, actually, let me get back into payroll again and show you how that works. If you go back to help and go to live chat right here, you can get an answer pretty quickly. It asks you for your name and your email address, and then what your question is. So you just type it in and click the chat with analyst, and they've got people that are manning this chat area, and they'll answer you back fairly quickly. So if it's something that you need an answer right away, you might try the chat. If it's something that you can hold or have them do a callback, then go ahead and call the support line for that. Okay, again, just a reminder of what dates were closed for both Sage and OnPoint. And then I think we're good. All right, so thank you for joining us today. Again, our Atrix form session is going to be on December 11th. We're going to repeat the year-end processes that we just covered today. We're going to repeat those in another session on the 18th. So if you'd like to come back, or if you have other members of your staff that you want them to sit in, please let us know so that we can get you included in the invite for this. So I want to thank you guys very much for joining me. If you have any questions right now, you can type those in the chat area, and Tina can forward or show those to me. Otherwise, if you want to send Tina an email with any questions that you might have, she'll forward that on to myself, and I will be happy to to answer those for you just as soon as I can. So Tina, are there any questions in the chat area?
I actually don't see any right now, so I think we're pretty good.
Okay, let's give them a minute and see if they have anything. Doesn't sound like anybody is.
No.
Okay.
No, not seeing any.
Okay. All right. So if you think of anything later, you guys, go ahead and send Tina an email, and she'll forward that to me, and I will respond back as soon as I can. Okay. Thanks again, and I hope to see you at our Atrix session.